Welcome to Be the Change. Be the Change. These words were spoken by the late, great Mahatma Gandhi. And he said them, and he lived by them, and he changed the face of India. Just freeing up the people of India from colonial rule. And another great man heard these words. The late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. heard them, and he took them to heart, and he practiced them, and he freed up a lot more people in the United States and literally around the world, creating more equality, greater opportunities for all people to come together and see each other as human beings regardless of race, color, nationality, or even religion. So be the change that you wish for this world. My name is Robert Harris. I host this program. I've got a great guest on, and you're going to love him. I know you're going to love him because he's lovable, and we're going to go right to him. Mike Moroski, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on the show, sir.
Oh,
it's a pleasure.
My pleasure. Oh, it's going to be our
come on,
pleasure.
we can do that all
That's
day.
right, okay. And hopefully it'll be the pleasure of our audience.
Absolutely.
Too, Listen, I introduced you that way because I really do like the things that you have to say, and I wanted to have you on the show. I wanted you to talk about being involved. Okay. I know you're running for council, but I'm not here to endorse you because I can't do that or not endorse you.
Fair enough.
But the thing I can do and want to do, and I mean it, is I need and want to expose you and all other people who are like you to this audience out here, because you are trying to make a difference. Absolutely. You want to make a difference.
I do.
Win, lose, or draw on the election, you have made a difference, and you will continue to make a difference. Am I getting your understanding correct?
Absolutely. It's pretty humbling, Robert. I really appreciate it. My whole motivating force my entire life has been to be the change, with not necessarily expecting any defined end result, but in being the change and in attempting to live my life that way, having a ripple effect to those around me. In fact, a former student of mine painted just a teeny little painting for me when I was at Purcell Marion, my last year there, and it says "Be the Change," and I put it right next to the mirror.
Know that.
Oh yeah, I put it right next to the mirror. It's the first thing I see every single morning. It says "Be the Change" on it. So, my guiding principle, Gandhi, of course, with the quote that you already explained beautifully, and a man named Václav Havel, who led the Velvet Revolution in the Czech Republic, and he talked a lot about when you go about this kind of work and trying to be a change agent in the world, you shouldn't go about it optimistically, because being optimistic about your work is ultimately going to lead you to pessimism. It may just take longer. His point being that optimism is doing something because you think it's going to work. What he talked about and what Gandhi talked about in a different way, and Dr. King, was hope. And what Havel says is doing something with hope and going about things with hope is different entirely than optimism, because hope is doing something simply because it's right, with no expectation of an end result. And I know when I was a young man, in my late teens and early 20s, I was always involved in the community. I always wanted to change things. I always saw social injustices even when I was young. It might have been I wasn't allowed to stay out past 8 o'clock, but I was fighting ever since that age, like we were talking about earlier, being a little kid saying something's wrong with this situation. But it was somewhere in my early to mid 20s I realized if I was to have a sustained impact on anything, I had to go about it from that hopeful angle.
And I agree with you. I mean, it's so funny because Jesse Jackson, his little slang, keep hope alive, keep hope alive. And we have to keep hope alive. And we do that individually as well as collectively.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I want to acknowledge right here and now, and just again, in talking to you and drawing some things out of you, I don't really have to draw much out of you. I have to just say, here's Mike. And Mike will run out of time. But we have a crew here. And this crew is a volunteer crew, and this crew comes from the Job Corps. And the Job Corps, are keeping hope alive. And these young people are keeping hope alive because they've decided that they were going to do something positive with their lives, and they're doing it. And I'm just thanking God and thanking them that they're gracious enough to come down here and help me to do this show, because it helps keep hope alive in me. I love seeing them. I love interacting with them, and then they help make the show what the show is all about. So, and I know you were talking to them as I was coming up here, and you were telling them about that, and you were also explaining that you were a school teacher. Talk a little bit more about your school teaching and your involvement with young people and with change.
Okay, yeah, sure. I started working in secondary education in 2001, began as an English teacher. I helped Moeller High School design, implement, and run the house system for its first 6 years. In that time when I was at Moeller teaching, I also, founded a service learning organization called Mach 1, Moeller Advocates for Community Housing. So in the same 10 years I was at Moeller, outside the walls of the school, I found myself being a community organizer over the cause of affordable housing and over the Rhine primarily. So it seemed like a natural connection to bring Moeller students who needed service hours down to meet my friends in over the Rhine, my low-income brothers and sisters and social service providers, to make that connection. In that time, I met a homeless man named Mike Rogers, who's now been clean close to 10 years.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, I have a lot of homeless friends and a lot of low-income friends, but for whatever reason, Mike and I just had a connection that I can't explain, nor do I feel the need to. Mm-hmm. Long story short, we opened a not-for-profit called Choices Cafe. We named it Choices, or actually our third business partner, Tony Morgan, who sadly was murdered about 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. Tony had been clean for 20 plus years, but not everybody around him was as supportive of Tony's new life choices. I don't feel I need to explain to you how that goes. So we named it Choices Cafe because we wanted to offer young men and women a place where they can make different life choices. Whether it was like our friends in Job Corps that we were just speaking about, my friends at Lower Price Hill Community School where I volunteer, or for affluent teens at Moeller High School or Mount Notre Dame High School, who have the ability to make more choices than a lot of our low-income friends. And so we formed this not-for-profit around the ideal that wealthy, low-income, black, white, Latina, Latino, anybody, male, female, can learn from one another. And we had a bunch of intentional programming around that to promote this relationship building. So in that, or through that, a program called the HELP program was born. Mm-hmm. And the HELP program works with folks with felony convictions returning from prison, many of whom are young men and women, where we would pair them with students, Moeller students, or Xavier University students, or Miami University students, where the students could teach them how to, things that I know I take for granted, things like operating a computer, looking for a job, building a resume, all the way to going to court and standing with them. So that, I'll take for example my friend Michael, who had returned from prison in his early 20s with 2 children, and he was exhausted from 11, 12 years of hitting the pavement on the streets, having not been taught anything different. He was exhausted. And for someone like Michael, to have someone go to court with him, even if it was, I don't want to say just, but even if it was a 15-year-old boy from Moeller High School that was learning more about the justice system, that meant a lot to Michael that somebody stood there with him. Mm-hmm. So through that whole process, earning a position on the drop-in center board, getting more involved with City Hall, I realized I wanted to be more involved in the city full-time because I was starting to feel pulled in a bunch of different directions. So that's when I went to Purcell Marion as their Dean of Students, which was a job I really loved.
What was the title of that position?
The Dean of Students.
Dean of Students, that's
and
what I thought you said.
Formerly known in the 80s and 90s as Dean of Discipline. Then it became Dean of Students. And that when I got there, I changed the name of the position to Dean of Student Life. The way I saw it, my job as Dean of Student Life at Purcell Marion was to love the student body. And sometimes loving the student body meant, coming down on them pretty hard. Sometimes it meant, embracing them. Usually it meant both. So when my friends would ask me, what do you do all day? I say, well, I love teenagers. And it's unique. Everyone needs something different. So that was my life in education, community organizing. I was part of a number of other not-for-profits, one that was educationally based called Wordplay Cincy, which is in the north side. Mm-hmm. But what I like to say is, in summary, my life very much, my professional life, including what I'm doing now, is very much the direct result of responding to the dreams of young people. I always knew I wanted to be involved in local politics ever since I was a teenager. Again, that need to try to right some of the ills. I never knew what that meant, though. And I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, and that education and studying not-for-profit business, which I've also studied and been engaged in, would be a good way to get into public life. But when I started teaching, I never once thought I would co-found nonprofits. That was, again, a result of responding to the dreams of the youth, because I was taking 2 or 3 students down with me to work at then Restock. Then it was 5, and then it was 10.
Restock, yeah.
And then they said to me, well, Mr. Moroski, we should adopt an entire building. And I come from a family, my father called people to change the light bulb, okay? I was never given any handy skills. So what do? I adopt buildings. We rehab them, turn them over to now Over the Rhine Community Housing for affordable housing. I make friends with my homeless buddy, Mike Rogers, and he and Tony say we should open a coffee shop. Okay. And then the students say we should do this at the coffee shop. Okay. And so regarding my relationship working with the young, it may sound cliche, but it's 100% true. My campaign manager, actually, who's sitting over there, we can't see him, Nick, is a former student of mine who used to work with me, down at Restock.
That's a great statement when your former student says, hey, let me be your campaign manager.
Right.
That's great.
Has no problem bossing me around. He'll tell me what to do, too, which is good. So
we all need handlers.
We all need handlers.
I've got several myself,
Yeah.
I tell you, again, it sounds fascinating, and it sounds like, again, you're living the life that you're talking about, and that's the one thing that I try to push forth to everyone with all my heart. There's a little saying that says, we're living in a country, we're living in a world where you can be anything you want to be. So therefore, be yourself.
Right.
Because we have too many people trying to be someone else, trying to be what someone else is dictating that they should be.
Yeah.
And it's stopping them from growing, and it's stopping them from giving their talents to this world. Because if we, each one of us, if we just simply put ourselves forth, putting ourselves first in one way, because we have to take care of number one. We have to. It sounds selfish. There's nothing wrong with that, because if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be around to take care of anyone else. I love it when I've flown on airplanes, and I used to fly a lot, and the stewardess or they've got a new name for them now. They don't call steward. I can't remember what they call
attendants.
Them. Attendants.
I think.
Maybe you might be right. When the flight attendant, you're right. When the flight attendant gives the presentation, they let you know that if the mask falls down,
yep.
That's oxygen. Put it on yourself first. Because if it's on you first, then you will be able to breathe and take care of grandma and the kids. Now, if you black out, there's no one left, or we don't know who might be left to take care of grandma and the kids. Right. So first take care of yourself, and then you can take care of other people. But don't forget the other people. One of my favorite sayings, Mike, and then we're going to take a quick little break, is from Rabbi Hillel. If I am not for me, who will be for me? If I am for myself alone, what am I? If not now, when? Yeah. And I believe that, and I try to operate like that, and you obviously are doing that. Folks, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Talk some more to this great man and good man. Be the change. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Be the Change. I'm your host, Robert Harris. My guest is Mike Moroski, and we are talking about being the change in the community. And Mike, you've got the floor, because you're engaged on more than one level. You're not just talking it, you're getting yourself involved in it. In fact, you've thrown your hat and yourself into the council race.
Yeah.
So talk about why you did that and what you're up to.
The main reason I threw my hat into the ring, and the main reason I've always been involved and interested in politics, is because I see the position of an elected official, ideally, as being the ultimate community organizing position. if come about in that way and in that manner, it is the ultimate community organizing job. That's how I see it. I also see politics as the ultimate expression and ability to plan for the future for the youth. And to me, personally and professionally and politically, if politics to you, the hypothetical you, is not about planning for a better future for Cincinnati's children, if you're local or Ohio state or national, federal, if it's not about planning for that better future, then politics is simply a self-aggrandizing endeavor. And my frustration with that, seeing that repeatedly in different political realms, is what initially got me fired up about politics when I was a young man, when I was in 8th grade, and Bert Mobley, my English teacher, gave me the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Okay, all right, that's powerful.
Well, and for a young man of age, let's say 13, 14, who grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta, my parents, very open-minded people. They have raised me to accept everyone and to work for the betterment of all people. But through no fault of their own, I grew up in the suburbs. So reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, having gone to Catholic schools and these private schools, that Bert Mobley really took my world and went, whoop. I had all of a sudden had all kinds of new questions. Then a man named Ice Cube made a movie called Boys in the Hood.
Okay.
Then a man named Spike Lee made a film called Do the Right Thing. And I'm watching these, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not what my neighborhood looks like. So anyhow, that initially got me interested. So without belaboring the point, I had always considered running in 2013. I left Moeller in 2011, and every position I sought was in the public sector, which would have enabled me to have this run this year. Well then, Purcell Marion essentially gave me the job, the Dean of Student Life. They reached out to me. I said, wow, I think I'd really love that job, and I love that school and the diversity of that school. So I went there, fully intending to be there until 2017 to launch this run, even though I already had a campaign team and other things ready to go for this year. Speed up the story, of course, in February of 2013, I was terminated from my position at Purcell Marion by the Archdiocese of Cincinnati for publicly supporting marriage equality. So when that happened, when that happened...
So that's what happened to you, okay.
That's ultimately how it all went down. Interestingly enough, the Archdiocese has since rewritten their employee contract. I was well aware of who my employer was and well aware of who I am. And about 70 to 80% of the reason I am the way I am is because I have gone to Catholic school my whole life. I was raised around Catholic priests and nuns and brothers, and my Catholic brothers and sisters really raised me to not accept injustice. So they very much made me this way. I have no problem with the Catholic Church. Again, though, my employers on 8th Street, I knew who they were, I knew who I was. I wrote a blog post on my website called Choose Your Battles, about choosing your battles. And the marriage equality argument came up, and I made the statement I unabashedly believe gay people should be allowed to marry. I knew I wasn't in violation of my contract because as an administrator and as someone who had investigated, researched, and helped to draft a new administrative model for the entire Archdiocese, which incidentally was accepted in November of 2012. And is now a new model to try to be more financially solvent so that we can accept more low-income students like at Purcell Marion. I knew what I could say and what I couldn't. So I was ultimately terminated for use of poor judgment, not for breach of contract. Anyhow, God works in very mysterious ways. I'm a very spiritual man.
Amen, I am too.
I follow the Spirit, and Spirit has rarely, if ever, led me astray. So a couple weeks went by, and I just recently got married, and my wife and I went through an interesting couple weeks, felt more support and love than anything, and after the couple weeks were up, she always knew my aspiration, my end game was politics. And so when the couple weeks were up, we started chatting, and I got a hold of my campaign team, and we had already been meeting for 2017. If I'm guilty of anything, it's planning too far in advance. And so I got a hold of everybody and said, what do y'all think? And actually, it was after I was on air with Jerry Tolliver about this Archdiocese thing.
Yeah.
And my friend, Mike Rogers, who I ran Choices with, my formerly homeless friend, he was listening to the program, and when I got in the car, I called him, and he said, what are you waiting for? Because Jerry kind of pushed it a little. Jerry's like, so why aren't you running this year? I was like, well, I still don't really know what's going on. And then my wife and I went out to dinner that night, and I said, look, unless you have any real objection to this, why not? So timeline-wise, literal-wise, that's why I'm doing it this year. The reason I've always been interested is the community organizing aspect. And as far as what I'd like to see different, I like to talk a lot about economic morality. And by economic morality, I mean capital investments, well-vetted investments that benefit more than 10% of the population. We live in a city, right? 20% or more, depending on any given day, lives in poverty. Half of all the children within the city limits, half of all the children that live within the city limits, I feel the need to say that twice. Wow. I don't know if it's to convince myself that it's true or others, live below the federal poverty line. Something's not right. There are only 3 neighborhoods out of all 52 that have a poverty level that's under 10%. 3 out of 52. So, and that's according to the Plan Cincinnati statistics of last year, the comprehensive plan.
Wow. Do you know what those are offhand, those 3?
Hyde Park, Mount Lookout, and California.
Wow.
They're the only 3. There are pockets of other neighborhoods that might be under 10%, but as far as a whole neighborhood, it's those 3. So, I look at a lot of the policies. I look at a lot of the things that are allowed to happen in Cincinnati that go unchecked. And I realize not everybody has morality as their guiding principle, and I don't expect them to. Again, that hope piece. I'm not expecting everyone to be like Robert Harris. However, people do have to follow the law, and there is legislation such as anti-displacement legislation that would protect affordable housing, discourage slumlording, and encourage equitable investment in all 52 neighborhoods. Anti-displacement legislation is a no-brainer in our city. Plan Cincinnati, the same city comprehensive plan, calls for 1,200 units of affordable housing in the central business district alone. So we're talking south of Central and between, right, the West End or Queensgate and Mount Adams. 1,300 units. We're supposed to have 1,300 units of affordable housing in the central business district. When Anna Louise Inn leaves, we'll have 30. So this is a plan drafted and approved by the city that's ignored. We have issues of visitability. We have issues of accessibility.
Explain visibility for those people who really might not know.
Sure. So for a home to be considered visitable, we're referring to citizens with disabilities, and we're referring to our aging population when we refer to visitability. So visitable standards are bare minimum, and it's referring simply to an entryway of a home, so the ability to get in the door and access to a restroom on the first floor. Bare minimum.
Which mobility limitations, that's essential.
Absolutely.
Wheelchairs, walkers, it's essential.
Essential. And most...
In fact, I want to interrupt you. I wanted to get this thought, but I know people right now who can barely get out of the nursing home because of the homes that are around them that they used to be part of have steps, and more steps.
Right.
And then some of them are blessed so that there aren't that many steps in their back entrances and sideway entrances, which is okay, as long as I can get in.
Right.
And as long as I can get in and go to the bathroom. I don't have to be able to sit at the table. You can bring me my food.
Right.
But, I got to be able to get in.
Absolutely.
And I have to be able to go to the bathroom. Keep talking because that's important.
So that's visitability. And so now that folks...
I can visit you.
That you can visit me or, correct.
Or be visited.
Or be visited. And so accessibility, virtually the same requirements, but with a 5-foot turning radius.
Right.
So it's more accessible, hence the term. So this term refers to businesses as well. In Cincinnati, I would invite anybody that's watching this right now to go look at all the new development on Calhoun. Not one of those businesses has an accessible or visitable business.
That's a sad thing.
Not one. And the reason for that is I'm always looking for the heart of the issue, not to point blame, but so I can figure out how to make things right, is the state building code. Now, a municipality cannot go above and beyond the state building code. But what we can do in Cincinnati is offer incentives to those that do. So the state doesn't require businesses, but we could. And again, for me, it's a moral issue, but I talk about economic morality. Economically, let's talk about my friend Robert Harris. Talk about some of my friends, my friend Heather.
Friend of mine too.
Heather Sturgill. Friends of mine. citizens with disabilities. Let's talk about the aging population. That's a vast majority everywhere in the country.
And it's growing.
And it's growing.
It's growing.
And we're going to have a lot of folks with accessibility issues in one day and not that long from now. My parents, so I'm talking about my parents who moved downtown, they're in their 70s, they don't want to be in a home. Well, if my friends with disabilities and my friends that are getting up there in age cannot leave their homes or go to businesses, it hurts the economy. So when I talk about visitability, yes, perhaps for me it's a moral issue, but economically, I have business degrees as well, it makes sense. We have one accessible cab in the entire city, one.
Which is really sad.
And the commissioners have their $5310 that the federal government has given them. So the question would be, well, why haven't the commissioners given it out? Well, because nobody at the city level has offered a plan. They did do a visitability study last year, Robert, and it's sitting somewhere up there on the second or third floor, and no one's looked at it.
Unfortunately, this city is notorious about that in terms of almost everything. I've been around for a long time, and we probably have at least 10 plans about every 10 years. Well, less than that, we do a plan, and then we stick it away. Listen, Mike, we're running out of time.
Okay.
I want you to give your number out or email out.
All right.
So go ahead and make yourself visible.
All right, I'd love to. So my name is Mike Moroski, and I'm running for Cincinnati City Council as an independent candidate. I have a number of major endorsements on my website, and small business owners that are backing me, feel free to go to MikeMoroski.com, MikeMoroski.com, and feel free to email me any and all questions at mike@MikeMoroski.com. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Folks, I want you to know that you can make a difference, that you have to be the one to make a difference. And if you want to be like Mike, run for council, run for city council, run for community council. Do something. Don't just sit there. For the young person, get involved in your school council. You know, if you're an old person, get involved in the candidate or candidates of your choice and vote. Your voice is your vote. Vote. I don't care what party you're with, independent, Democrat, Republican, or even some that I definitely try to write, or some that I do not support. You know, the Communist Party being one of those. You know, get involved. But even if I disagree with you, get involved. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. It's been a pleasure.
Be the change. Be the change. Be the change that you want for the world.